It was my birthday. The dining room was decorated with balloons. A chocolate cake sat in the middle of the table. For a moment, I thought the celebration was for me. Then my older sister, Sophia, walked downstairs wearing a sparkling blue dress. Mom smiled proudly. "Everyone," she announced, "Sophia has been accepted into the state's top performing arts academy." The room erupted into applause. Relatives hugged her. Dad wiped tears from his eyes. I stood quietly beside my untouched birthday cake. Nobody remembered why everyone had gathered in the first place. Not even my parents. An hour later, my grandmother walked over and whispered, "Sweetheart, happy birthday." She was the only one who remembered. That night, I blew out the candles alone after everyone had gone to bed. I made one wish. One day, someone would choose me first. My name is Emma Brooks, and growing up, I always came second. Second place at home. Second place in my parents' hearts. Second place in every family photo. My sister Sophia was the family's pride. She was beautiful, outgoing, talented, the kind of person who attracted attention the moment she entered a room. My parents couldn't stop talking about her. "Did you hear Sophia got another lead role?" Sophia's dance recital was amazing. Sophia is going to make this family proud. Whenever guests visited, they asked about Sophia. Nobody asked about me. I wasn't untalented. I simply loved different things. While Sophia loved the spotlight. I loved books. I loved solving problems. I loved building things. At 15, I designed a small budgeting app for one of my school projects. My computer science teacher was amazed. "You should enter the National Innovation Challenge," he said. "This could win." I rushed home, excited to tell my parents. Dad barely looked up from the television. "That's nice." Mom smiled politely. "Can you tell us later?" "We're helping Sophia prepare for her audition." My excitement disappeared. "Sure." That later never came. A few months later, the Innovation Challenge announced its winners. I won first place, along with a $20,000 scholarship. The school principal personally called my parents. I thought, finally, they'll be proud. That evening, Mom hugged me. Dad smiled. For exactly 2 minutes. Then Sophia walked into the room crying. I didn't get the role. Immediately, everyone's attention shifted. Mom held her tightly. Dad comforted her. My trophy stayed on the kitchen counter, still inside the box. No one opened it. By the time I graduated high school, I'd learned not to expect much. During graduation, I received the award for academic excellence. When my name was announced, the audience applauded. I looked toward my family. Mom was busy showing someone photos of Sophia's latest stage performance. Dad wasn't even watching the stage. For a second, I wondered if they had heard my name at all. After the ceremony, Dad finally walked over. Congratulations. Before I could answer, he smiled. By the way, Sophia just got invited to audition in Los Angeles. Again, the conversation wasn't about me.
College changed everything.
I earned a full scholarship to the University of Chicago. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who appreciated my ideas instead of comparing me to someone else. I studied business and software engineering. While other students spent weekends at parties, I spent mine building apps and meeting entrepreneurs. It wasn't glamorous, but I loved every minute of it. During my final year, my professor introduced me to a startup founder looking for someone to solve a difficult problem. I worked on the project for 6 months. When it launched, the company offered me a partnership instead of a job. At 24, I owned 10% of a rapidly growing tech company. Meanwhile, Sophia became a social media influencer. For a while, everything looked perfect. Designer clothes, luxury vacations, thousands of followers. My parents couldn't stop talking about her. Every family dinner sounded the same. Did you see Sophia's latest brand deal? She was invited to another celebrity event. She's living the dream. Sometimes, they forgot I was sitting at the same table. One Christmas, I drove 6 hours home hoping things had changed. I walked into the living room carrying gifts for everyone. Mom hugged me. It's good to see you. Then she pointed toward the hallway. Sophia will be here in an hour. Within minutes, the entire house became chaotic. Dad started decorating. Mom cooked Sophia's favorite meal. They asked me to help clean the guest room. I quietly did as they asked. When Sophia finally arrived, everyone rushed outside to greet her. No one noticed that I was still inside, setting the dinner table alone. As I looked through the window,
I realized something.
I had spent my entire life trying to earn love that should have been given freely. And maybe the only way to stop feeling invisible was to stop waiting for someone else to finally see me. I had no idea that just a few years later, the parents who always chose my sister would have no one left to turn to accept me. 3 years passed. Life moved faster than I ever imagined. The small tech startup I had joined exploded in popularity. What began with 10 employees had grown into hundreds. Our software was being used by businesses across the country. One Friday morning, our CEO walked into the conference room with a huge smile. We've officially signed the acquisition deal. Everyone started cheering. The company had just been sold to one of the largest technology firms in America. As one of the early partners, I suddenly became a millionaire. For a long moment, I simply stared at the numbers on my screen. Not because of the money, but because I remembered the little girl whose birthday everyone had forgotten. She would never have believed this moment was possible. Instead of buying expensive cars or posting photos online, I bought something I dreamed about for years. A beautiful home overlooking Lake Michigan. Nothing flashy, just peaceful. A place that finally felt like it belonged to me. On moving day, my grandmother came to visit. She looked around the house with tears in her eyes. "You did all this by yourself." I smiled. I had a lot of help from teachers, mentors, and people who believed in me. She gently squeezed my hand. "I always believed in you too." "I know. You were the first." She smiled warmly. "And I'll always be proud of that." A few weeks later, my phone rang. It was Mom. I smiled, surprised. She rarely called first. Mom. Her voice sounded unusually cheerful. "Emma, your father and I were wondering if you could come over this weekend." "Of course. Is everything okay?" "Oh, yes. We just miss you." Something about her voice felt different, almost nervous. When I arrived at my parents' house, Sophia's luxury SUV was gone. Inside, the atmosphere felt heavy. Dad looked older. Mom seemed exhausted. After dinner, Dad cleared his throat. "We've been having some financial problems." I stayed quiet. "Our retirement investments. They failed." Mom looked down. "We also helped Sophia start her fashion brand. It didn't work out." I blinked. "How much did you invest?" Dad hesitated. "Almost everything." The room became silent. "Where's Sophia?" I finally asked. Mom forced a smile. "She's traveling." Dad looked away. The silence answered my question. After dinner, I quietly called my grandmother.
She sighed.
"Emma? There's something you don't know." "What happened?" "Sophia hasn't spoken to your parents in almost 8 months." "What?" "After the business failed, she blamed them. She said they never gave her enough. Then she moved to California. And she barely answers their calls." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The daughter they had sacrificed everything for had disappeared when they needed her most. Over the next few weeks, I visited more often. Every visit revealed another problem. Bills stacked on the kitchen table, medical expenses, mortgage payments, Dad quietly searching for part-time work at 68, Mom secretly selling her jewelry. One afternoon, I found Dad sitting alone on the porch. "I failed," he whispered. "You didn't fail." "I did. I spent my whole life trying to give Sophia everything. And now, I don't even know how to pay next month's bills." I looked at him for a long time. "Dad, did you ever realize that I needed you too?" His eyes filled with tears. "I realize it now. I just realized it too late. That night, I couldn't sleep.
Part of me wanted to walk away.
For years, I had begged for their attention. Now they needed mine. Another part of me remembered every forgotten birthday, every ignored achievement, every lonely night they had chosen, again and again. Now life had made its own choice. The next morning, I met with my financial advisor. I want to help them. He looked surprised. After everything you've told me? I nodded slowly. Not because they earned it, because I don't want bitterness deciding who I become. Over the next month, I quietly paid off their mortgage, cleared every medical bill, created a retirement fund in both their names. Instead, the bank manager called. Dad phoned me immediately. Emma? The bank says someone paid everything. Do you know anything about this? I smiled softly. I just wanted you to stop worrying. The other end of the line became silent. I heard my father crying. It was the first time in my life I had ever heard him cry. I don't deserve you, he whispered.
No.
You deserved better parents. I closed my eyes. For years, those were the words I had wanted to hear. But somehow, they didn't erase the past. They simply acknowledged it. A few days later, Mom called again. Emma? Can we come see your house? There was something different in her voice. Not pride. Not expectation. Humility. I agreed. I had no idea that their visit would lead to the most honest conversation our family had ever had. The following Saturday, my parents arrived at my house. Mom stepped out of the car first. She looked around the property in complete silence. Dad slowly removed his glasses. I never imagined, he whispered. You built all of this? I smiled. Come inside. As they walked through the front door, they looked at every detail. The large windows overlooking the lake, the home office, the library, the peaceful backyard. It wasn't the biggest house in the neighborhood, but it represented something priceless. A life I had built on my own. Mom stopped in front of a wall covered with framed photographs. There were pictures of me graduating from college, receiving business awards, speaking at technology conferences, volunteering with young women learning to code. She stared at them for a long time. Then she quietly asked, when did all of this happen? I smiled sadly, while everyone was watching Sophia. The room fell silent. No one knew what to say. For several minutes, the only sound was the ticking clock. Finally, Dad spoke. Emma? I owe you an apology. I looked at him. I spent so much time chasing your sister's dreams. I forgot to see yours. Mom wiped away a tear. I thought Sophia needed us more. But you stopped asking for us. I nodded, because every time I did, I felt invisible. Mom covered her face. I'm so sorry. Dad reached into his jacket pocket and placed a small envelope on the table. I found this while cleaning the attic. I opened it, the one I had searched for years. On the back was a note written in childish handwriting. To Mom and Dad. I hope you're proud of me too. I froze. I remembered writing those words. I had hidden the certificate in their bedroom, hoping they would find it. They never did. Mom burst into tears. I never even saw this. Dad lowered his head. And that's exactly the problem. A week later, something unexpected happened. Sophia came home. She walked through my parents' front door, wearing expensive sunglasses and carrying designer luggage. She looked around the quiet house. Where is everyone? Dad calmly replied, at Emma's. Her smile faded. She's helping us. Sophia laughed. Emma? The quiet one? Dad looked directly at her. The daughter we should have appreciated years ago. For the first time in her life, Sophia had nothing to say. That evening, Sophia came to my house. When I opened the door, she stood there awkwardly. I heard you've been helping Mom and Dad. I have. She looked down. I didn't know things had gotten this bad. I stayed silent. They never told me. I sighed. Did you ever ask? She couldn't answer. Instead, she quietly sat on my porch. I spent my whole life believing I deserved everything. And when life became difficult, I ran away. She looked at me. You stayed. I smiled gently. Someone had to. Over the next few months, our family slowly began to heal. Not because the past disappeared, but because everyone finally admitted the truth. Mom and Dad started coming to family counseling. Sophia apologized more than once. This time, her actions matched her words. She found a regular job, stopped depending on our parents, visited every weekend. For the first time in years, we sat around the dinner table without comparing one child to the other. One afternoon, I received an invitation from my old high school.
They wanted me to speak at graduation.
Standing on that stage brought back so many memories. I looked at the students sitting where I once had. Then I noticed my parents in the front row. They weren't looking at Sophia.
They were looking at me.
With tears in their eyes, the principal introduced me. Please welcome entrepreneur and philanthropist Emma Brooks. The auditorium applauded. I smiled and began. When I was your age, I believed success meant proving people wrong. I paused. But life taught me something better. Success isn't about making the people who doubted you feel small. It's about becoming someone who can lift others up. The room became completely silent. If you've ever felt overlooked, if you've ever believed you weren't enough, don't let someone else's opinion become your future. Keep learning, keep working, and never measure your worth by how loudly someone applauds another person. The audience stood and clapped. I looked toward my parents. Dad was crying openly. Mom whispered, "That's our daughter." For the first time, those words weren't about comparison. They were about pride. A year later, I started a scholarship called the First Choice Foundation. Its mission was simple: to help young people